He followed the alien princess into danger and lived. For most species, it was a place of commerce and politics, but for Arik, a human engineer assigned to maintenance duties, it was just another shift. Humans were rare here, often underestimated, considered too fragile or simple to matter in the grand schemes of alien empires. Arik had learned long ago that people rarely looked at him twice. That invisibility suited him fine, until today. The emergency alarms blared, cutting through the steady hum of machinery. Lights flickered as the station's automated systems switched to red alert. Arik wiped grease from his hands and glanced around. Most of the alien staff had already fled towards safer areas or huddled in protective pods. It was chaos. He could hear sharp clicks and hisses from the hallways, the unmistakable sound of the Vornax soldiers, tall, jagged creatures known for their merciless efficiency, closing in. Arik didn't know what exactly had triggered the alarm. His communication panel crackled with distant screams, garbled messages in languages he barely understood. Then he saw her, the princess. She was running, her silver robes catching the emergency lights, flowing around her like liquid metal. Her face was pale even for her species, eyes wide but focused. Arik froze for a moment, shocked. He had only seen pictures of Princess Liara before, regal, untouchable, almost like a statue. Now she was real, human-sized and real, and she was in danger. The hallways ahead were narrow, barely wider than two humans side by side. Vornax soldiers were already blocking exits, their multi-jointed limbs clicking on the metal floor. Most of the alien engineers and guards hesitated, calculating their chances. They would have run. Arik's first instinct was to stay hidden, to avoid being crushed between royal politics and alien weapons. But something in him moved, almost without thinking. He ran. His boots pounded against the metal plates as he caught up with Liara. She glanced back, eyes narrowing at him. "You shouldn't be here," she shouted. Her voice had a melodic quality, alien yet beautiful. The words were sharp, laced with urgency. "I'm not leaving you," Arik shouted back, panting. He had no idea if she understood humans, but somehow she did. The moment passed without another word. The enemy was approaching faster. They turned a corner and ducked into a maintenance shaft, a narrow passage that humans usually ignored. Liara squeezed through effortlessly, but for Arik it was tight. His backpack snagged on a pipe, dragging him back. He yanked it loose and stumbled forward, heart racing. The princess waited at the far end, and when he finally reached her, she gave him a brief nod. That nod, so small and subtle, felt heavier than any metal. She was trusting him, and for the first time, Arik felt the weight of that trust. The corridor opened into a larger chamber, filled with machinery that hummed and clicked in alien rhythms. Strange devices lined the walls, glowing with lights that changed color depending on function. Liara moved gracefully, familiar with every panel and console, and Arik realized that despite her royal upbringing, she was no stranger to technology. He followed, touching buttons and levers as she directed him, helping to unlock doors, reroute power, and create temporary barricades. The Vornax were relentless. Their clicking grew louder, their shadows stretching over the walls. Arik caught sight of a soldier, tall, armored, with claws glinting under the red light, approaching fast. His mind raced. Most humans would have panicked, but he had something no one expected: adaptability. He grabbed a loose panel and swung it in the soldier's path. It hit with a metallic clang, startling the creature. It hissed and retreated just long enough for him and the princess to slip through another door. Liara was watching him now, keenly observing how he moved, how he reacted. "You are not like the others," she said quietly, almost to herself. Her words startled him. Humans were often underestimated here. She could have left him behind, expected him to fall. But she didn't. She was seeing him, really seeing him. They emerged onto a balcony that overlooked the station's docking bay. Ships of all shapes and sizes were connected to the station, some abandoned, some still crewed. The Vornax were advancing toward the main exit, and there was no way through without a fight. Liara's eyes scanned the ships, calculating, measuring. Then she pointed toward a small transport vessel docked near the edge. "That one," she said. "We can make it." Arik looked at the vessel. It was barely large enough for a human and an alien princess, but it was their only chance. "I'll get us there," he said. He did not know how he knew, but he had confidence, a strange, human kind of stubbornness. They ran along catwalks, leaping over gaps and ducking under swinging pipes. The Vornax had noticed them now, and their pursuit became frantic. Liara moved with precision, but Arik could see her exhaustion. Even a princess had limits. And yet she did not slow down, not for a second. When they reached the transport, Arik slid the ramp open and helped Liara climb inside. The cockpit was cramped, designed for alien hands, but he figured it out quickly. He had worked on enough machines to improvise, to adjust levers and buttons he didn't fully understand. The engines roared to life, the ship vibrating under their feet. The Vornax soldiers were at the edge of the docking bay now, their claws scraping the metal. "Go," Liara shouted. Arik pushed the throttle forward. The ship lurched, then shot into the void. The stars blurred around them, the station shrinking behind them. For a moment, silence filled the cockpit. The danger had passed, but the tension remained, thick and unspoken. Liara finally looked at him, her eyes searching. "Why did you follow me?" she asked. Her voice was steady, but there was curiosity there, an intensity that made him pause. I couldn't leave you," he said simply. There was no heroism in his voice, no grandeur, just truth. He had followed because he saw someone in danger and did what he thought was right. It was almost too simple for the grand galactic stakes surrounding them, but somehow it worked. Liara considered him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Humans are unusual." She did not say it as an insult, it was more like an observation, a realization dawning. She was used to beings who acted out of fear, politics, or duty. Arik acted out of choice. That was different, that was rare. The transport hummed as it traveled through space. Arik's hands were sore, his body exhausted, but he felt alive in a way he had never felt before. He had survived situations that should have killed him, simply by following his instincts and refusing to accept the impossible. He glanced at Liara, who was quietly monitoring their trajectory, her usual composed self returning. He wondered if she would ever see him as more than a human who got lucky. But the truth was, he didn't need her to see him that way. He had already proven something important. Humans could survive when no one expected them to. Hours passed in tense silence. Liara occasionally spoke, asking questions about humans, about Earth, about why he had risked his life. Arik answered honestly, careful not to sound boastful, careful to stay alive. The stars outside the window shifted, a vast canvas that reminded them how small and fragile life was, yet how stubbornly it could persist. By the time they approached a nearby asteroid colony, the danger of the immediate attack had passed. The Vornax had retreated, but their influence stretched across systems. They would come again. Arik knew that. Liara knew that. But for the first time, a human had followed an alien princess into the heart of danger and survived. That survival was more than luck, it was proof. Proof that human ingenuity, persistence, and courage could not be ignored. Liara finally spoke, her tone softer now. "You could have died, most would have." Arik shrugged, trying to hide the fatigue in his shoulders. "Most humans would have, too, but I'm not most humans." For a brief moment, they shared a quiet smile. No words could capture the magnitude of what had just happened. They had crossed boundaries of culture, species, and expectation. The universe had thrown everything at them, and they had endured. Together. As the asteroid colony came into view, blinking lights like distant fireflies in the void, Arik realized something profound. His life had changed. Not because he had followed a princess, not because he had survived the impossible, but because he had proven something universal. Courage was not a matter of strength, species, or status. It was a matter of choice. And for the first time in his life, Eric felt that being human was enough. The asteroid colony floated quietly in the shadow of a dying star, its metallic structures reflecting faint amber light. For most visitors, it was a backwater settlement, a place for refueling and repairs, forgotten by the empires that controlled the nearby systems. But for Princess Liara and Arik, it was a sanctuary, if only temporary. They had landed the transport on the largest docking platform, the metal plates groaning under the ship's weight. Liara's eyes scanned the colony carefully. "We can't stay long," she said. "The Vornax will send scouts. They will find us if we linger." Arik nodded, wiping sweat from his brow. "Where do we go next?" he asked. His body ached, muscles stiff from running, climbing, and narrowly avoiding death. Every step felt heavy, but his mind was alert, as if adrenaline alone kept him alive. Liara led him through a narrow corridor into the heart of the colony. The walls were lined with pipes and conduits, glowing faintly with the energy that kept the settlement alive. Dust clung to the floors, and the hum of machinery was constant, almost soothing. Yet danger was never far. Even in this quiet place, Arik could sense eyes watching them. "Follow me," Liara whispered, moving like a shadow. She guided him past empty chambers, through maintenance tunnels, and finally into a large control room. Screens displayed maps of nearby space, alerts from communication relays, and incoming energy signatures. For the first time, Arik saw the complexity of her world, the political tension, the danger, the careful calculations required to survive. "We need to get off this station soon," she said, pointing at a map. "The Vornax are still searching. Their patrols are thorough, but they rely on their strength and intimidation. They don't understand humans." Arik frowned. "So what do we do?" Liara's eyes softened as she studied him. "We go where no one expects us. There is an old sector of this colony, abandoned for decades. It is dangerous, filled with old machines and unstable energy fields. No Vornax would dare enter it. We can hide there until we plan our next move." Arik followed her through narrow corridors that twisted like a labyrinth. Rusted metal groaned beneath their feet, and some sections were almost completely dark. He held his hand close to the wall, feeling for pipes and edges, moving slowly but carefully. The closer they got to the abandoned sector, the more he realized how ill-prepared most beings were to navigate it. "Be careful," Liara warned. "The corridors shift." "Some areas collapse without warning." Arik nodded. Humans were not physically the strongest species in the galaxy, but their minds were adaptable. He moved deliberately, using the environment to his advantage, memorizing patterns of debris, weak walls, and broken floors. When a panel collapsed beneath his foot, he managed to grab a pipe and swing himself to safety, surprising even himself. They reached a large chamber, dimly lit by flickering emergency lights. Broken machinery lay scattered across the floor, and wires hung from the ceiling like dangerous vines. The air smelled faintly metallic, a mixture of rust and old energy. Liara paused, studying the room carefully. "This will do," she said. "It's not comfortable, but it's safe enough for now." Arik looked around. "Safe enough," he repeated. "I've been running for hours, fighting creatures that want to kill us, and you think this is safe?" Liara gave a small smile. "Safe enough is all any of us ever get." They settled in, taking a moment to catch their breath. Arik examined the room, noticing old control panels and blinking lights. Despite the age of the technology, he could see how it could be used. Humans had a way of understanding machines intuitively, something many aliens did not possess. He began tinkering with a console, rerouting power to strengthen the temporary barriers they had set up. Liara watched silently, impressed by his persistence and ingenuity. Hours passed in tense silence. Occasionally, distant sounds echoed through the empty corridors, metallic crashes, soft hisses, or strange groans from the aging station. Eric felt uneasy, but he forced himself to remain calm. Survival required focus, not fear. Liara finally spoke. "You are unlike anyone I have ever met." Eric looked up from the console. "I get that a lot." "No," she said softly, "not like that. You are persistent, resourceful. You do not rely on strength or numbers. You think, you adapt. That is why you are still alive." Eric felt a strange warmth at her words. No one had ever looked at him that way before. Not a superior, not an ally, not even a friend. He realized that survival was not just about the body. It was also about being understood, recognized. Suddenly, the console beeped loudly. Eric jumped, startled. Liara moved to see what had triggered the alert. "The Vornax patrols are changing course," she said, her voice tense. "They are closer than we thought. We need to move again." Eric swallowed hard, feeling a knot of fear in his stomach. "Where do we go?" "There is an old smuggling route beneath the colony," Liara explained. "It leads to an uncharted sector, far from patrols. It is dangerous, but it is our best chance." They moved quickly, navigating through narrow maintenance tunnels, avoiding areas where debris could fall or energy surges might fry circuits. Eric's heart pounded, but he did not falter. He had already survived what most beings would consider impossible. Every step he took was deliberate, calculated. He had learned to trust his instincts. The tunnels twisted and turned, each corner a potential trap. Strange sounds echoed around them, metallic scraping, low hums, and occasional distant clicks that reminded Eric of the Vornax soldiers. He glanced at Liara, who moved with grace and purpose, yet even she looked wary. At one point, a section of the tunnel collapsed, blocking their path. Eric did not panic. He scanned the area, looking for weak points in the debris. With careful effort, he shifted panels and pried loose beams, creating a small passage just large enough for them to squeeze through. Liara slipped through first, followed closely by him. The collapse had slowed them, but it had not stopped them. Finally, they reached a large chamber, partially flooded with water from a broken pipe. Strange bioluminescent plants had taken root in the shallow pools, casting an eerie glow. Liara paused, sensing the alien life forms. "These have been here for centuries," she said. "They are harmless, but we must be careful not to disturb them too much." Eric stepped lightly, careful not to crush the glowing flora. The chamber was beautiful in its own strange way, a reminder that even in abandoned places, life could persist. He felt a sense of awe, but he could not forget the danger surrounding them. Liara led him through a narrow passage at the far end of the chamber. They emerged into a section of the colony that had been completely abandoned, rusted walls, broken machinery, and the faint hum of old energy fields. It was quiet, almost unnervingly so. "This is it," Liara said. "We can rest here for a while. No patrol will enter this sector." Eric sank to the floor, exhausted. His muscles ached, and his mind was weary from constant vigilance. Yet beneath the exhaustion, there was a strange exhilaration. He had followed a princess into danger, survived impossible odds, and learned something profound. Humans were not as fragile as the galaxy believed. Liara sat beside him, her posture relaxed for the first time since their escape. "You are remarkable," she said softly. "I have seen many species, many warriors, many clever beings, but you are different." Eric smiled faintly, brushing sweat from his forehead. "I guess humans have a way of surviving." "No," she corrected gently. "You have a way of surviving. That is what matters. Not your species, not your strength, but your mind, your will, your heart. That is what the Vornax underestimate." The night, or what passed for night in a stationary colony, dragged on. Eric and Liara rested where they could, taking turns keeping watch. The danger had not passed, and the Vornax would eventually resume their search. But for now, they had a moment of peace, a brief respite in the chaos. Eric reflected on the events of the past hours. He had learned to trust instincts over rules, courage over caution, and choice over expectation. The galaxy was vast, full of dangers and unknowns, but humans had a way of enduring that others often failed to recognize. He had seen it firsthand. Liara watched him, noting how his eyes scanned the chamber even in rest, how his body remained alert despite exhaustion. She realized that humans were unpredictable, not in a reckless way, but in a way that made them resilient. That resilience could not be ignored, could not be contained by alien prejudice or assumptions. As the faint glow of the bioluminescent plants lit the chamber, Eric finally allowed himself a moment of calm. He was not invincible, but he was alive. He had followed the princess into danger, survived when others expected him to fail, and proved that even a single human could make a difference. In the quiet of the abandoned sector, the two of them sat side by side, a human and a princess, connected by shared danger and unspoken respect. The Vornax would come again, the universe would continue to challenge them, but for now they had survived. That survival was more than luck. It was a testament to choice, courage, and the enduring strength of the human spirit. And in that moment, Eric realized something profound. He was no longer just a human in an alien galaxy. He was someone who had faced the impossible, adapted, endured, and lived. And that was the first step toward something far greater than either he or the princess could yet imagine. The uncharted sector stretched before them like a forgotten relic of the past. Rusted structures jutted from the surface of an asteroid, their sharp edges catching the faint light of distant stars. For most species, this place was avoided, whispered about as dangerous and unstable. But for Princess Liara and Arik, it was the only refuge left from the relentless pursuit of the Vornax. Liara led the way, moving with caution yet determination. Every step through the broken walkways and half-collapsed corridors reminded her that one wrong move could end their journey. Arik followed closely, scanning the surroundings, calculating the stability of each platform before stepping. He had learned to rely on instinct as much as observation. Humans were unpredictable in ways most alien species failed to anticipate. That unpredictability was now their strongest weapon. This sector was once a research outpost, Liara said quietly, her voice barely more than a whisper. Abandoned decades ago after the energy fields became unstable. No one comes here. No one survives long if they do. Arik glanced around. The walls were lined with old conduits sparking occasionally, machines groaning under strain, and the air thick with the smell of ozone and rust. "So, why are we here again?" he asked, his tone half joking, half serious. "Because it is the only place where the Vornax will not immediately find us," she replied. "We will survive here long enough to plan our next move. We may even be able to turn the situation to our advantage." Arik nodded, feeling a strange surge of confidence. Survival was not guaranteed, but he had learned over the past hours that humans could endure. And in this sector, they could endure while others might fail. They moved deeper into the ruins, the floor shifting beneath their feet. At one point, a section of the corridor gave way, and Arik had to grab a support beam to avoid falling into the dark abyss below. Liara stopped and extended her hand, steadying him. "Humans are tenacious," she observed. "You do not give up easily." "I've had to survive," Arik said simply, pushing himself upright. "You don't get far otherwise." She studied him, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "There is more to your survival than instinct. There is intelligence, courage, and," she paused, searching for the right word, "willpower. You remind me why some beings underestimate humans. They assume fragility, but you are different." Arik felt a strange warmth at her words. Recognition, even from a princess of an alien empire, carried weight. It was not just approval, it was understanding. As they continued, strange noises echoed through the corridors. The old machines groaned, and distant rumbles suggested the asteroid itself was shifting. Liara's eyes narrowed. "Stay alert. The sector is unstable, but there may also be others here, some who do not want to see us survive." Eric adjusted his pack, checking the few tools he had scavenged from their transport. Others, he asked. Who could possibly be here? Liara shook her head. Scavengers, rogue species, mercenaries, anyone who sees opportunity in isolation. We may not only face the Vornax. The corridor opened into a large chamber filled with towering machinery, some half-functional, some silent for decades. Pipes ran along the walls, leaking steam and energy sparks, and the floor was uneven with gaps and rubble. This was the perfect place to hide, but it was also a trap if one moved carelessly. Eric moved carefully, stepping over broken panels and testing the stability of platforms. He noticed small patterns in the machinery, weak points that could shift to block or expose their path. His mind worked faster than his fear. Every human instinct, every learned skill, every ounce of resilience he possessed was focused on survival. Liara followed, her movements precise but watchful. Even a princess trained in diplomacy and command could not match the awareness Eric had developed in mere hours of fleeing danger. She realized more clearly than before that humans were underestimated for a reason. Their survival depended not on strength alone, but on the ability to adapt, to improvise, to persist when every other being would falter. Suddenly, a shadow moved across the chamber. Eric froze, signaling Liara to stay still. A group of Vornax scouts emerged from a side corridor, their claws clicking against the metal floor. Their armor reflected the flickering lights, and their red eyes glowed faintly in the dim chamber. "They found us," Liara whispered. Eric studied them. There was no way to outrun them in the open chamber. He scanned the room, looking for cover, traps, or tools. His gaze settled on a section of old conduits hanging from the ceiling, loose and ready to fall. He caught Liara's eye and nodded. "Follow my lead." They moved quickly, ducking behind machinery. Eric yanked at a support beam, loosening the conduits above the approaching Vornax. As the first soldier passed, the pipes collapsed, creating a barrier and startling the enemies. Sparks flew, and one soldier hissed in frustration. Liara took the moment to dash forward, Eric close behind. The Vornax recovered quickly, but Eric's human ingenuity continued to surprise them. He used the environment to their advantage, knocking over equipment, creating false paths and confusing their pursuers. Liara watched in awe as he anticipated moves, adapting instantly to new threats. Finally, they reached a narrow tunnel that led further into the abandoned sector. It was unstable, and the Vornax were too large to follow easily. Liara exhaled, relief evident on her face. "You are incredible," she said. Eric shrugged, trying to hide his exhaustion. "I'm just surviving," he said, "but it looks like it's working." They pressed on, navigating through the labyrinthine tunnels. Along the way, they discovered remnants of the old research outpost, damaged consoles, broken crates of alien supplies, and strange devices whose purposes had long been forgotten. Eric examined each one carefully, trying to determine what could be useful. His human curiosity, coupled with his engineering skills, allowed him to see opportunities others would overlook. At one point, Liara stopped and pointed to a control panel. "This can help us," she said. "If we activate the energy reroutes, we can create defensive barriers and slow the Vornax if they follow." Eric studied the panel, his fingers moving over alien symbols and switches. It was complex, but he could understand the logic behind it. In a matter of minutes, he managed to reroute the energy, lighting up sections of the chamber and creating temporary shields from debris and sparks. Liara's eyes widened in admiration. "You do not just survive. You manipulate the environment. You change the rules." A distant rumble shook the tunnels. The asteroid was unstable, and every misstep could trigger a collapse. Eric's senses sharpened. He realized that survival here required not just reaction but anticipation. He began marking weak spots, planning paths, and preparing contingencies. Liara observed silently, learning from his methods. Hours passed, and the Vornax scouts gave up the chase, unable to navigate the complex, unstable sector as efficiently as humans could. Eric and Liara had survived another wave of danger, not by brute force, but by ingenuity, observation, and adaptability. They finally reached a chamber that had been untouched for decades, a sanctuary within the abandoned sector. Strange bioluminescent flora grew in shallow pools of water, casting soft light over the rusted machinery. The air was thick but breathable, and for the first time in hours, Eric allowed himself to relax. Liara sat beside him, her expression thoughtful. "You have shown me something remarkable," she said softly. "Not because you are strong or fast, but because you never gave up. You see possibilities where others see death. You endure where others would fail." Eric looked at her, catching the faintest trace of a smile. "I didn't think about being remarkable," he said. "I just didn't want to die." "No," she corrected gently. "You did not want to die, yes, but more than that, you chose to act. That choice, that persistence, it is what makes humans extraordinary. I have seen many species, many beings, many warriors. You are different." The quiet of the chamber settled around them, a rare moment of calm in a universe filled with danger. Eric reflected on what they had endured. Every step, every choice, every small act of courage had brought them here. Humans were often underestimated, dismissed as weak or fragile, but here, in this abandoned sector, human ingenuity and persistence had become their greatest weapon. Liara stood, her gaze sweeping over the chamber. "We cannot stay here forever," she said. "The Vornax will regroup. They will send more scouts, more soldiers. But now we know we can survive against odds that others would consider impossible. We can turn this situation to our advantage." Eric nodded, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. He had followed a princess into danger, survived impossible odds, and proven that humans could endure when others would fail. But survival alone was not enough now. They had to act, to plan, to prepare for the next stage of the journey. As they rested, Eric realized that every challenge they faced was a lesson. Every collapse, every pursuit, every trap had taught him something about adaptation, strategy, and the value of persistence. And Liara, who had once seen him as merely a human, now saw him as an equal, a partner, a strategist, a survivor. The stars outside the cracked walls of the asteroid cast faint light into the chamber. Eric and Liara prepared their supplies, checked their equipment, and planned their next move. The Vornax were formidable, but they had underestimated humans. They had underestimated Eric. And that mistake would be costly. The asteroid sector trembled under distant tremors, a constant reminder that they were far from safe. Princess Liara and Eric stood at the edge of the abandoned outpost, overlooking a vast field of jagged rock and broken metal. Somewhere beyond the horizon, the Vornax were regrouping, their red eyes scanning the dark for any sign of escape. But now, for the first time, Eric did not feel helpless. He had survived impossible odds before, and he had learned that human ingenuity could bend circumstances to their favor. Liara studied him, her expression tense but determined. "This is it," she said. "If we leave, the Vornax will pursue us again. If we stay, we might turn this place into a trap they cannot escape. The choice is yours, Eric. Are you ready?" Eric glanced at the jagged terrain below and then at the princess. He could feel exhaustion in his muscles, but his mind was sharp. "I'm ready," he said simply. "We've survived this long. We can survive anything if we plan carefully," Liara nodded. "Then we act." They began to move through the sector, selecting positions that gave them both cover and vantage points. Broken machinery, rusted towers, and uneven terrain became weapons in Eric's mind. Every loose panel could be toppled, every pipe could create a barrier, every old energy field could be rerouted to slow an enemy. He quickly organized the materials around them, improvising traps with the precision of someone who had learned survival under fire. Liara watched silently, impressed by his foresight. Most species would charge blindly, she said. You think ahead, predict consequences, and adapt. Humans are remarkable. Eric allowed himself a brief smile. He had always known that humans were underestimated across the galaxy. Every empire, every species assumed weakness in their form, fragility in their frame. But he had seen that human resilience, creativity, and adaptability could outmatch brute strength when circumstances were dire. Now he had proof. The first wave of Vornak's scouts arrived as darkness fell over the sector. Their silhouettes emerged from the jagged rocks, moving cautiously but with deadly intent. They were confident, expecting humans and an alien princess to falter. What they did not expect was the network of traps Eric had prepared. As the Vornaks advanced, the ground beneath them shifted unexpectedly. Panels collapsed, creating pitfalls. Sparks flew from exposed conduits, startling the creatures. Eric watched, calculating the results in real time. Some of the Vornaks fell into shallow pits or were slowed by toppled machinery. Others hesitated, confused by the unpredictability of the humans' defenses. Liara moved alongside him, her skills complementing his. She was agile, precise, and trained to exploit weaknesses. Together, they became a force of improvisation and strategy. While the Vornaks relied on brute strength, Eric relied on observation, planning, and adaptability, qualities that turned the environment itself into a weapon. Hours passed, each wave of Vornak scouts growing more cautious. Eric realized that the enemy underestimated humans because they assumed physical strength determined survival. Yet here in this forgotten sector, it was clear that intelligence, creativity, and persistence mattered far more. At one point, a massive Vornak soldier broke through the outer barriers, its claws gleaming in the dim light. Liara froze, her usual composure tested. Eric assessed the situation quickly. "Use the energy conduits," he shouted. "I can lure it into the trap." He ran across the uneven ground, drawing the Vornaks toward a precarious section of machinery. The creature followed, predictable in its aggression. At the last moment, Eric triggered a series of old energy panels, sending sparks flying and toppling metal beams. The Vornax was caught, immobilized by its own momentum and the chaotic environment. Liara quickly moved in to ensure it could not recover. "That was incredible," she said, her voice laced with awe. "You see opportunities where others see danger." Eric shrugged. "I don't have a choice," he said. "If we fail, we die. If we adapt, we live." As night deepened, they fortified their position further. The Vornak's commander appeared, larger and more imposing than any soldier Eric had faced. Red eyes glowed with fury as it assessed the situation, realizing its scouts had failed. The creature's confidence was shaken, but it still moved with deadly intent. Liara looked to Eric. "This is the final confrontation," she said. "If we succeed, we may end the pursuit for good. If we fail," Eric nodded, his mind already calculating the plan. "We won't fail," he said. "Trust me." They moved strategically, drawing the commander into an area they had prepared in advance. Broken machinery, unstable floors, and exposed energy conduits created a maze. The Vornak stumbled into traps, slowed by the chaotic environment. Eric used every skill he had learned over the past days, timing, observation, prediction, to manipulate the battlefield. The final clash was intense. The commander's strength was unmatched, but it relied on predictable patterns. Eric anticipated each move, exploiting openings and guiding the creature into hazardous zones. Liara provided precise support, striking when opportunities arose. Together, they turned the Vornax's brute strength against itself. Finally, the commander was immobilized, caught between fallen debris and sparking energy panels. Liara stepped forward, her presence commanding and regal. "It ends here," she declared. The Vornax hesitated, recognizing the authority she carried. Eric stayed beside her, silent but unwavering. His human persistence and ingenuity had earned him a place by her side, a position that no one had expected a human to hold. The commander finally yielded, retreating under the realization that the humans' survival was not accidental. It had underestimated them, and that mistake had nearly cost it everything. Liara turned to Eric, her eyes filled with admiration. "You have done more than survive," she said. "You have shown me the truth about humans. You have changed how my people will see your species. You have proven that courage, intelligence, and persistence matter more than strength alone." Eric felt a mixture of exhaustion and pride. He had followed a princess into danger, faced overwhelming odds, and emerged alive, not because of sheer force, but because he refused to give up. The universe had assumed humans were weak. Now it had to recognize otherwise. The aftermath was quiet. The sector was littered with debris, the Vornax had retreated, and the abandoned outpost had witnessed a victory few would believe. Liara and Eric surveyed the scene, taking a moment to catch their breath. The princess's expression was thoughtful, almost reverent. "You could have died at any moment," Liara said softly. "Most humans would have, but you," she paused, searching for words, "you endured, you adapted, you survived when others would have failed." Eric shook his head. "I just did what I had to do," he said. "I didn't think about proving anything, I just didn't give up." "No," she said gently. "That is exactly what you have proven, that humans cannot be underestimated. That survival is more than strength, it is will, it is creativity, it is the courage to face the impossible. You are not just a survivor, you are an example." For the first time, Eric felt the weight of recognition, not as a human, not as an outsider, but as an individual who had chosen to act when it mattered most. He had followed a princess into danger, survived impossible odds, and emerged not as a mere participant in events, but as a catalyst for change. Liara looked at him with a newfound respect. "The galaxy will remember this," she said. "Your actions today have shifted perceptions. Humanity will no longer be dismissed as weak or insignificant. And you," she smiled faintly, "you have earned a place of honor among those who defy expectation." Eric allowed himself a small smile, feeling a sense of calm he had never known. The Vornax threat was not gone, but they had survived. They had proven that even the most underestimated species could endure, adapt, and prevail. As dawn approached over the jagged asteroid field, Liara and Eric prepared to leave the sector. Their transport was ready, and for the first time in days, the stars beyond the hull seemed welcoming rather than threatening. Liara placed a hand on his shoulder. "You chose to follow me into danger," she said, "and you lived. But more than that, you have shown me why humans are not to be underestimated. That is a lesson I will carry for the rest of my life, and one I will ensure others understand." Eric nodded, feeling the truth in her words. He had acted out of instinct, courage, and the simple desire to survive, and in doing so, he had changed the way a princess, and soon an entire empire, viewed humanity. They boarded the transport, engines humming, and lifted off from the abandoned sector. The Vornax would continue their pursuit in some distant corner of the galaxy, but the human and the princess had survived against impossible odds. Together, they had faced danger, adapted, and endured. As the transport accelerated into the void, Eric glanced at Liara. "So, what happens now?" he asked. Liara smiled, a mix of relief and pride in her expression. "Now," she said, "we ensure that humanity is recognized not for its fragility but for its courage, persistence, and ingenuity. And you, Eric, will always be remembered as the one who proved it." Eric leaned back in his seat, exhaustion mingling with satisfaction. He had followed a princess into danger, faced impossible odds, and lived, not through luck, but through human determination, intelligence, and persistence. And as the stars stretched out before them, he realized something profound. In a universe that often underestimated humanity, even a single human could make a difference. And he had made that difference. He followed the alien princess into danger and lived.